Inter Miami are your MLS Cup champions for 2025, and the Vancouver Whitecaps coming up just a little bit short. Wheeler, Platt, Wilson with you. It was a really watchable game down in Fort Lauderdale. Oliver was there in the flesh, but it ended in disappointment for the Vancouver Whitecaps. Not that they didn't play well. At least I don't think that's the case, Oliver. I think it's more the fact that they played decent enough for 70 minutes and they just weren't able to finish the job. What were your impressions? What is your assessment of the Whitecaps' performance and inevitably Lionel Messi and company going on to win MLS Cup?
Yeah, I think in terms of the Whitecaps themselves, I did think they played really well for an hour. And then Ahmed got the equalizer. Sabi hit both posts, and that felt like the real turning point where, you know, they had them on the ropes, didn't take their chances, and then it kind of fell apart a little bit. I do think to a certain extent, though, and I've had a couple of people I've talked to push back a little bit on this, but this is how I felt coming out of the game. I thought they played well and just got messied to a certain extent in that game. Like, he was... Even when he wasn't involved, like the first goal, he's not directly getting a goal or assist, obviously. He takes like three players out of the game with a few touches and completely turns a non-threatening situation into a really dangerous one. So he was incredibly influential in obviously the big moments. The Whitecaps just couldn't quite find enough of those big moments themselves, I think, to capitalize on the good play. Miami, to their credit, I thought did defend well for stretches and are improved in that regards. But Messi decided the game for me. That was the big decisive factor.
Ollie's onto something for sure. I'll echo that sentiment a little bit, and then I'll add something different. But you think about a player that walks around, looks for little gaps and holes and where to fill up. But you think of a situation where most players get into a rhythm of a game, right? Like have to be playing at a certain level to reach peak performance. And you have Messi kind of just looking around like, oh, if the ball gets me here, I can go and change the game. Like, how do you even defend that? Some of that's just out of rhythm, but that could produce like quality. So I totally agree with him being influential in all three goals, and they kept getting better and better when you think about it. But I said this leading up to the match for Vancouver Whitecaps. It's a final where if you make big mistakes, a team like Inter Miami will punish you. But also, if you make a mistake in their 18-yard box, that's whatever. But if you lose the ball in transition, they will score. And you see that with, the first goal is just one of those where it just hurts. Like of course, there's other things that could happen to you to stop it, but it's unlucky. But you think about the second goal, which is the one that's the one that broke Vancouver Whitecaps back, it's just being a bit too careless, a bit too nonchalant, not understanding that if I lose the ball right now in 5 seconds, the ball could be in the back of our net. And that's just how Inter Miami play. Like with the players that they have, with the DePauls, we look at Allende when you're looking at Messi being the biggest one. That's all they need. 30 yards from your goal, they'll go play a ball in behind, running in, and then they have the quality to finish. So look, the Whitecaps, will get into it, had a fantastic year. But I said this, going into this match is going to be about the little mistakes. And if you could nullify them and almost be perfect defensively, you have a shot. But there's no world where you can give more than 3 chances, but they obviously scored 3 goals away and expect to win that match. That just wasn't going to happen for Vancouver on the day.
It was a Kubas mistake crisis, and I can't believe that Messi won the ball off him. A defensive intervention from Messi and a perfectly weighted pass for that second goal. And the third one was in desperation time. The chest, the touch over the top by Messi were both exquisite. I was shocked, though, that still there was 20 plus minutes remaining to play, and there was very little punchback by the Vancouver Whitecaps. Jesper Sorensen, I think he's been brilliant all season long. I thought he set up his team for success, but the changes just simply didn't come off. When Ali Ahmed came off and Ryan Gauld played in the wide area, that didn't look right. The change at center back, losing Ralph Priso, that was a big one. Perhaps bringing Jaden Nelson on too late. With all due respect, because I think that Thomas Muller's class, both on and off the field, wasn't his best game at all. And simply put, Messi did the job going one way and Muller didn't do it the other way. Could Jesper Sorensen maybe have navigated things a little bit differently here, Ollie? Because after that goal was conceded, the game completely just petered out. Yes, the simulation by Inter Miami, the time wasting was infuriating. I will absolutely acknowledge that. and Drew Fisher, the Canadian official, kind of let them get away with it to a certain degree. I think there should be much more stoppage time, but there was a lack of evidence to show that the Whitecaps, they seemed shell-shocked after they conceded that second goal, and they never got it back on track.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fact that the subs didn't work, and how much you want to criticize Jesper Sorensen is kind of, how much do you think there were other options available to him versus how much of it is just armchair management after the fact? Could he have gone with Tate Johnson and moved Laborda to centre back? Pupe coming on, having played 4 minutes for the Vancouver Whitecaps entering the final, was a surprising one for sure. Ali Ahmed, there was some talk that he was sick. I wasn't able to confirm that, but that I think maybe led to that substitution. And he looked like he'd emptied the tank. He'd had a really good battle with the right back Frey, who I thought had a very good game. And then Muller was the one where you were kind of expecting him to come off for Ryan Gold at some point, and he looks like he had given everything he has, but they kept him on the pitch. And again, that's a question of like, do you take him off because he looks tired, or do you keep him on because he's Thomas Muller, right? It's a tough one. So it didn't work out for them. I was surprised not to see Jaden Nelson until so late on in the game. He was someone who felt like it could have given them a bit of pace and spark in it, especially with Gold, who's not a pacey player coming on for Ahmed, and then Muller kind of laboring a little bit. Could Nelson just giving you that little bit of extra energy? So there are some questions you can ask there, but I just have a tough time really criticizing Jesper Sorensen, given again, I thought they played quite well, and I think he got a lot of aspects of his game plan right.
It's difficult to criticize because if you keep on Ahmed, didn't know he was sick, Ali, even if he's like not even 100%, but do you run him for 10 more minutes just off of momentum, right? Like the way, specifically, forget the first half, but the start of the second half where Vancouver Whitecaps were the most deadly, the momentum has shifted, right? Like you could feel Inter Miami were on their heels. They were literally against the ropes. And that's when you have Ahmed's goal, Sabi hitting both posts. You want to think, okay, we have them on the ropes. Should we run Ahmed a little bit more, maybe 10 minutes more? But then I think about it, when all's said and done, because coaches do this, and you look at the players you had on the bench and the players that you played, is there a world where Ryan Gauld is able to play and you only give him a 10 minutes in a final? Like, that's where we are right now with the Whitecaps. It's like before people would be like, well, this guy's crazy. If he's good enough to even play 45 minutes, forget who you take out. You put Ryan Gauld on the pitch. Then Muller came like manna from heaven, and he's come to Vancouver Whitecaps. You're like, you run him to the end. It's difficult because throughout the season for Jesper Sorensen, he's made players that were probably average in the world's eyes be starters and guys who could finish games and who could contribute. But now he had to find a way to piece them all in the finals. And it's difficult. But again, I don't think the biggest thing was the substitutions. I just feel like football is cruel. And when you have a team like Inter Miami on the ropes and you hit both posts and you have a moment to take the lead and put pressure on Messi, it has to happen. And the fact that it didn't kind of led to their demise on the day.
The weirdest feel about coming out of the final, Ali, and correct me if I'm wrong, I might be wrong on this. I kind of felt like the game ended and you're like, the reaction was like, oh, that's too bad for the Whitecaps. Right? Like, it's a cup final, and when my teams in the past have lost, like, I've been devastated. I've been like inconsolable at times, but this one it was kind of like, oh, we lost to Messi, which is very weird because the team didn't play poorly, but I'm not sure how much of a punch in the gut this was because the season was so good for the Whitecaps. Like, it was a feel-good story. There was momentum. One of the most likable teams that I can kind of reference in recent memory. I just didn't get that sense that, oh my God, we lost like, it was kind of like almost conciliatory in a way. Like, how did you feel about that? Am I reading the situation wrong here? Like,
no.
Were the Whitecaps that far off it, and just in terms of being underdogs in this game, that there was almost an acceptance like, yeah, we had a great year, finals done?
Yeah, no, I think there was a bit of both. I do think that the players, Sorensen, like seeing them after the match, I certainly think they took it very hard, and the supporters as well, who were excellent. There were 2,000 of them there in one end. Like, I think it was a pretty devastating defeat for them, regardless of what anyone will say about favourites and underdogs and so on. But I do think, and you heard after the game from some of the players, Thomas Muller talks about it a little bit. I think there was an appreciation as well for what this team has been able to do, right? Like, I think this team has just massively advanced the cause of the Vancouver Whitecaps in Vancouver at a very crucial time, obviously now in their history, which I'm sure we'll get onto when it comes to securing that future. And I think there was, like I said, some appreciation for kind of the season that it's been and the journey they've been on, which I think, regardless of the result in this game, has been sensational, mixed in with obviously the devastation of losing a final.
Yeah, some of that might have to do with the fact they lost to Lionel Messi as well. Like, I just,
of course, yeah.
I get not being there is a much different reality to what you experienced from afar. It just felt like a coronation, and there was widespread respect for how good the Whitecaps were. That's why, yeah, it's a bitter pill to swallow, but it just didn't. Maybe it's also, Jordan, because it seems like the Whitecaps trajectory is kind of going this way.
Yeah,
and it's almost kind of laid the groundwork for potentially running this back for the most part, and them being just a very good team for the foreseeable.
Yeah, I think so. Two things. You already mentioned the Messi part, right? Everything geared up, the fact that they hosted, the fact that every 2 minutes it felt like it was panned to David Beckham and family, and like it just felt like Inter Miami, this is the story of them to win it and to lift it. And Mascherano, I've never seen him run onto the pitch ever as a player or a sub, but now as a manager running on and hugging Jordan. It just felt like Miami.
That was a little much.
It was a lot. I'm not going to lie to you. It was a lot. It was one of those. As an opposing player, I'd stick out the foot and just give him a little trip and just be like, yeah, grab the pitch, bro. Like, what are you doing? Yellow card, maybe if you must, ref. But like, what are we doing? I get the excitement, but just contain yourself. I digress. A part of it, you got to look at contextually. We follow this team closely. We watch the run wheels. We've done every show all the year there in the studio, nearly every time as well. A year ago, what were we talking about the Whitecaps? No way we thought they would go to 2 finals this season. Like, okay, can champs, we probably felt like they had in the bag to do the 4-peat. But like, look at this team. Mueller playing for them. Gauld not even being a consistent figure in this squad, and they're still dangerous. The players that have emerged. Nelson, Priso, Ahmed, all like TFC or TFC Academy kids being top players, young players for me in the MLS. Come on. The feel-good stories that you could talk about this Vancouver Whitecaps team. I think that's why when you watch this game, you're like, shucks, you feel for them. But it almost, for me, gave me a little bit of vibe, not about the score and about 2016 when TFC lost, but just about getting there and losing, what that could do for a franchise. Because I just know going into this 2026 season, they will be there. They will be there. If they go over the line, again, the football gods have it written. But Jesper Sørensen, what he's done with this squad, get 1 or 2 players, retain that core, they could do some real damage. And with all that's going on with Vancouver, if they're going to be there, what their future looks like, I just think on the franchise and the player part, that is just a beautiful story to be a part of.
The bit that I thought was actually a little bit different to normal was the winners. Like, I remember being at BMO when Toronto won, and the place was shaking, and it felt like the pinnacle of everyone who was there, their career, right? Like in terms of that team. With Inter Miami, it's impossible to say that winning MLS Cup is the pinnacle for a lot of those players, right? Like, it might be somewhere in the 30s in terms of Messi's list of trophies. And so that was a little bit of a different feel in terms of, like, obviously they were happy and there was a lot of joy there, but it wasn't like the roof came off the place in the same way that I think I've experienced it in the past at MLS Cups.
Miami's a funny sports town because people there love their sports. Like, they do. They love their sports, but it's less fervent. Like, it's like with the Heat or the Panthers or anyone maybe outside the U. Like, it's just
the biggest story was the university this weekend.
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm getting at. That the U is number one, and then everything else. Like, people like a winner, and they like the Messi story, but it's less rabid. Like, it's just a different sporting environment. So congratulations to Inter Miami. Difficult one for the Vancouver Whitecaps, but man, like, you're right, maybe some changes around the edges for 2026, but this team seems to be going on the proper path to both short and long-term success. So, and by the way, I just want to give a shout out to the club in general, bringing down the 79 team and fans and people around the team was like, I've talked to a lot of people that went down there. It was first class treatment by the owners, by everyone involved, the players, like Thomas Muller being being available to the fans and the people in and around the club throughout. Like, it was just, I was told it was just like top class, just in the way that the Whitecaps club treated the occasion. Let's get to the other major talking point over the course of the weekend that seemed in a way to overshadow the actual team playing the biggest game in club history, at least since 1979. It's the future of the club. And the MLS commissioner, Don Garber, was all over it. He was double and tripling down on this sentiment that the Whitecaps situation at BC Place was untenable. He said it pitch side as the final was about to take place with TSN's Farhan Lalji. What did you make of that? Was there too much of a focus on the Whitecaps' future on a weekend that was extremely important for the club, Oliver Platt?
Yeah, the more kind of I think on it and reflect on it, and the comments he made, prior to the game in his State of the League address, the less it kind of sat well with me, to be honest with you. I understand, obviously, the explanation as to why he does it. He tries to take the highest leverage moments to make his point, and there's kind of a business aspect to that. I really would have liked to have heard a little bit more from him, though, on not just what other people can do for him and can do for MLS, and maybe a bit more what MLS can do for the Vancouver Whitecaps to secure that club's future and to set up the brightest possible future in Vancouver. Like, I don't like the kind of implication that they can kind of take it or leave it when it comes to the Whitecaps. And I understand that they're in a good place right now. They feel like they're in a good place, at least with the stars playing in the league, with the new stadiums coming into the league. But there's still something there in Vancouver for me, like 50 years of history, that I don't think this league should be just dispensing without, much of a thought or a real giving it absolutely everything you have to set them up in a better way. So we all get it. Like, we talk about a lot, the need for better facilities in this country, the need maybe for some more support from government for soccer in this country. That's all part of it, and that's all fair. But I think some of this is on MLS as well, like helping the Whitecaps to find new investment, new ownership potentially, and playing their part too. So I just thought the balance was maybe a little bit off, and put me off a little bit this weekend. What
did you make of it, Jordan?
I think timing is everything, right? So on one hand, I think also too, in the business world, is like when people are talking about a club, when it's the penultimate of a weekend, that is a perfect time to bring up other things. Because if the neutral is looking up Vancouver Whitecaps into Miami, then they're also going to see all the stuff that's going on about moving a stadium or moving a team, moving a franchise, or what that could look like for BC. So that feels like an opportune time. But the footy player in me is just like, this is a big occasion that players won't ever maybe get to again, or it might take a while to get to. It's difficult, specifically how the MLS is set up. It's difficult to get to a final. So the fact that going into that weekend, I heard a lot more about Don Garber and his thoughts, and not so much on the players. And even a part of it, I get it, that you can't always predict certain things, but even seeing like pre-so and certain players having to like avoid questions about it the day before a match is about to happen, the biggest one of their careers, some of their careers. I didn't love that part. I just hope there's a solution. I'm with Ollie in terms of a club that has had so much success, that's been around for 50 years, and you're thinking about where they're moving. And a Canadian club, I could tell my bias, I'm putting it right there. The fact that a Canadian club on the continental front is doing big things as well, it just feels like it needs to stay in Vancouver, right? So let's make sure that all of our efforts and the people that are the ones making the decision can see that and recognize that. Because it's so easy to move and shift, but can we just keep that culture and that fan base there? And I think for Vancouver, they've also been through a lot throughout the years in terms of shifts and movement. So it would just be nice if we could be a permanent solution for the city.
I should mention, Garber and MLS played hardball with Columbus. They ended up getting a stadium out of it. But there's certain cities and markets, especially a Canadian market in American League, where I think that Garber feels like he can lean in a little bit more. He was in the city 3-4 weeks ago. I think everything should have been said at that time and not in not having used MLS Cup weekend, again, the biggest game in club history, it was aggressive timing. And I'm sure that Whitecaps fans don't appreciate that. And look, like, just say this was New York City FC. They've been trying to get this stadium done forever. They've one of the glamour, clubs based on their ownership, who they represented, the city they represent, that's still playing in baseball stadiums, and not just one, two of them. So picking the battle against the Whitecaps this weekend didn't really sit well with me at all. With that being said, clearly work needs to be done. The Whitecaps, the problem is with BC Place, they need to sign a lease with a facility that's run by the province. Money's been going into this facility in order to host MLS or World Cup games. I think there was some pressure to be able to get that done. But in order to provide the club the means to generate revenue going forward, they need their own stadium. They don't get concession, parking. They get no revenue playing at its BC Place. So the club ends up losing $8, $9, $10 million a season, which has nothing to do with the valuation of the franchise, what it's worth. It's the dollars that are coming out of the ownership group's pockets. That's why when the club announced that they were putting some stake or the stake in the team up for sale ahead of last season, because they need more investors or investment in order to keep the team here. The thing is, it's all entirely complicated. We've been reporting on this for months, and it happened over the weekend that the race course, the Hastings race course, shut down permanently, and that has been pegged for quite some time to be a potential future home of a brand new Whitecap stadium. The problem is there's Indigenous interests involved, there's municipal interest involved, there's provincial. If you're going to bring in someone with a different sort of ownership stake in the club, how much is it going to be and what's in it for them in order to be able to contribute to a stadium project? This all seems incredibly convoluted, exceptionally difficult, and is going to require different levels of government as well as different levels of private interest in order to get this over the line. And by the way, not to mention the Indigenous political situation in the province of British Columbia is very difficult as well. So getting this done, Oliver, the commissioner might come out and say that this needs to get done, but that's easier said than done. There's plenty of different interests here. Like, it's not just here's a plot of land, can we build a stadium? It doesn't work that way. At least not there in Vancouver, and at least not right now.
It's not easy to get done. There'll be a lot to think about and a lot to resolve. There's also the case of that facility, the potential facility, that site, you are moving the team out of downtown Vancouver as well. So it's an area that is not as central and not as connected. And does that have to factor into the thinking too? So I do think that obviously this is going to take some time. Obviously building a stadium, even if you get approval to get it done tomorrow, is going to take some time. And so they need to work out the BC Place situation. I think that, to be honest, becomes the priority at the minute, is finding a more viable way to make that stadium the short-term home while they figure out the long-term, because the building a new one, I think could take several years.
Really quickly on this, in an athletic piece, it mentioned a number of different cities who are waiting in the wings to bring a club to their city. The common destinations of Las Vegas and Indianapolis and Detroit were mentioned, but Edmonton was thrown into the equation as well. Edmonton? Didn't MLS just move to a winter calendar? It's you try to cut through some of the noise when it comes to these things. I'm sure that there are cities that are ready to step up and potentially buy a club that may need a new home, and perhaps it's just part of the equation that Garber's trying to leverage here. There has to be some priority markets, and with due respect to Edmonton, I just don't think that would be one of them, Jordan.
I heard your voice. I'll make my response really quick, Wheels. You have a phrase that you say sometimes when things get a bit crazy. You read something. I saw Edmonton. I said, oh, God, no. Freezing. I played CPL. Freezing. What was it? Come on. As much as I know that the Edmonton fans would be great, we're having a hard time with Toronto and maybe, not Vancouver, but Toronto with Montreal winterizing their stadiums. Edmonton there'd be a lot of games postponed. What would be happening there?
A summer calendar. Edmonton's a great sporting city. It's a great city, but playing games in the summer, absolutely. Winter time would be the Azteca from November through March. it seems wild to me. But this is what. Let's end on this note, Ollie. Like, you were around people with the Whitecaps and their fans over the course of the weekend. Like, what's the level of concern here when you hear these other cities mentioned, and when the commissioner clearly has an agenda, something he wants to get off his chest in MLS Cup final weekend?
I think as much as anything, it's just a lack of clarity right now, right? Like in terms of ownership, in terms of stadium solution, in terms of what the commissioner's saying. Like, I don't think anyone quite knows exactly what to think of it and how real the threat is. I don't think it should be. I don't think the threat should be real for the reasons I just outlined, that I think MLS should be doing everything possible to set this team up in the best possible way in Vancouver. But yeah, it's that kind of lack of clarity that stands out to me. That there's people trying to obviously reassure the Whitecaps fans. The mayor of Vancouver was at the game. He was mingling with the fans in their tailgate before the game, and I think trying to offer some reassurance that, you know, they're going to figure this out and make it work. Now we'll see over the next few weeks. I'm sure there'll be a kind of a response to what Garber has said this weekend, and we'll see province and city try and figure this out and find a solution with MLS.
Quick turnaround, CONCACAF Champions Cup starting in February. The team will tinker, they'll refresh, and they'll be ready to go for the new season. But even more so, we'll see what also transpires off the field to hopefully ensure the Vancouver Whitecaps with an even brighter future.